You have to go back to what the strategy was at the beginning of the shutdown. There were two goals, both of which I support. One was standing up to Donald Trump. The other was getting some resolution on the ACA premium tax credit issue. The problem was the shutdown wasn't accomplishing either goals, and there was there was zero likelihood that it was going to. In terms of standing up to Donald Trump, the shutdown actually gave him more power. Exhibit A being what he's done with SNAP and SNAP benefits across the country. Oh, by the way, Joe, you're going to love this. Guess who's getting paid during the shutdown? Not the park rangers or air traffic controllers. The ICE agents. Under special law, under that big awful bill that they passed last summer, the ICE agents are being paid. Nobody else is. So standing up to Donald Trump didn't work. It actually gave him more.
Let's begin with Madeline Rivera, live from Washington, with the latest on when we can expect this shutdown to officially end. Maddie, good morning.
Good morning, Todd. Well, the vote the Senate took overnight is the first step in a series of procedural maneuvers. And of course, the House will have to vote on the package too. So it will take a few more days before the government reopens. But Sunday's vote was the first clear sign that a bipartisan deal had been reached after a roughly 40-day stalemate. The Senate voted 60-40 to back a revamped GOP funding bill that would keep the government open until the end of January. 8 Democrats joined Republicans to pass the bill, including Senate Minority Whip Dick Durbin, Senators Tim Kaine, Catherine Cortez Masto, and Jackie Rosen.
History and, when you think about it, completely pointless. In all honesty, Chuck Schumer and the Democrats found themselves in a dire predicament.
Senator Chuck Schumer, your leader on the Senate, said they cannot support a continuing resolution that fails to address health care. I am voting no. Did you do this outside leadership, and was there a big push for you not to join the others and break the 60 threshold?
No, we kept leadership informed throughout. And I think it's important to remember who's responsible for why.
Stay closely as we break down the confusion, go over the main options, and resolve the disagreement if you're as confused by this as I am. Hey, if you're all about keeping up with the turmoil, that would mean the world to me. Let's carry on with this. All right, let's break it down piece by piece. Therefore, how did the Democrats purposefully concede throughout this entire farce surrounding the shutdown? Their plan to take a strong stand against Trump was the beginning of it all. They concluded that the best way to achieve this was to adhere to specific objectives, such as addressing the tax credits under the Affordable Care Act and opposing Trump's policies. But as things developed, their strategy was derailed.
For months and months, Democrats have been fighting to get the Senate to address the health care crisis. This bill does nothing to ensure that that crisis is addressed. I am voting no, and I will.
You see, they were so focused on trying to make a point, a claim they could not support, that they failed to notice that Americans were suffering. Let's discuss the 8 Senate Democrats who decided the situation was too much and broke with their party to terminate it.
Tonight, 8 Democrats voted with the Republicans to allow them to go forward on this continuing resolution. And to my mind, this was a very, very bad vote. What it does, first of all, is it raises healthcare premiums for over 20 million Americans by doubling, and in some cases tripling or quadrupling. People can't afford that when we're already paying the highest prices in the world for healthcare. Number 2, it paves the way for 15 million people to be thrown off of Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. Studies show that will mean that some 50,000 Americans will die every year unnecessarily. And all of that was done to give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the 1%. As everybody knows, just on Tuesday, we had an election all over this country. And what the election showed is that the American people want us to stand up to Trumpism, to his war against working class people, to his authoritarianism. That is what the American people wanted, but tonight, that is not.
All it ultimately did was strengthen Trump's position as he expressed anger over the shutdown of essential services like SNAP while ICE workers continued receiving pay, turning the Democrats' plan into a complete misfire that hurt ordinary Americans instead of challenging the administration as intended. 42 million people lost SNAP benefits, millions of military members and federal employees worked without pay, and Democrats defended their stance by saying they were protecting Affordable Care Act subsidies, for about 20 million individuals. An explanation that felt uneven and caused far more harm than help. Confusion spread within the party, and Bernie Sanders openly criticized the decision as a terrible choice.
The Rules Committee in the House are meeting to pretty much go over what tomorrow will look like. We'll likely see a final vote on that in the 5 p.m. Hour tomorrow. But as for tonight, we're seeing some potential pushback between Democrats who are strongly opposed to the bill as it came from the Senate, as they make the case to the Rules Committee. Considering they're in the minority, it's unlikely they would do much to swaying the votes of the majority there. But as it stands right now, we could be well on our way to the government reopening tomorrow sometime in the evening, Major.
So you spoke about House Democrats. Our colleague, Caitlin Huey-Burns, spoke with Jim McGovern, Democrat from Massachusetts, the ranking Democrat on the House Rules Committee, where Democrats are by design severely outnumbered, for his take on where things stand. Let's take a quick listen to that.
Echoing voters who feared rising premiums and more families facing health emergencies without coverage, though the position seemed aligned with progressive values, the moment exposed a deeper flaw. Attempts to satisfy everyone often end up disappointing loyal supporters. Senators resisting Trumpism were praised as defenders of the vulnerable, yet even Sanders accused his own colleagues of risking people's well-being for small political gains. The emotional and financial fallout became obvious, and Democrats eventually had to retreat and join Republicans to reopen the government, leaving the 8 who crossed the aisle to face harsh backlash despite their pragmatism.
Before pushback, there were just a couple of Republicans who voted against the House continuing resolution before it made its way to the Senate, that being Representative Thomas Massie. Grijalva is an interesting case. Once she's sworn in, it's likely we'll see that same Republican Massie look to force a vote or a petition to force essentially the release of the so-called Epstein files, considering that they would then have the simple majority in the Republicans who support this measure as well. But as it relates to this government shutdown, a lot of Democrats are pushing back, saying that we, Democrats in the Senate, essentially gave up any leverage that they had by conceding to this, saying that they agreed to a promise of a future vote of the extension of a healthcare tax subsidy, but it not being married to this could be a fatal flaw.
With each day of gridlock, the party's influence weakened, families struggled, workers worried about their paychecks, and the media fueled division. Chuck Schumer tried to manage the rising pressure, insisting he remained committed to improving healthcare, but his words rang hollow as frustration grew nationwide. Once it became clear they had no solid ground left, Democrats stepped back, forced to confront the cracks forming in their once strong foundation and the urgent need for genuine, practical leadership. As they regroup, this episode should remind them that political showmanship carries real consequences for the people they aim to protect, and now the question remains, how will this shape their reputation moving forward?